Many thanks to Skillshare, the generous sponsors of this video. Hello and thanks for joining me for some more landscape photography. It's a beautiful spring morning, about 6:30 a.m. and I'm heading up Pen Yr Ole Wen in the Ogwen Valley. When I've decided to take a pit stop here right alongside the lovely little stream of Avon Llwyer as it cascades down the eastern flank of Pen Yr Ole Wen. As you can see over my shoulder, perfect view of Tryfan. So what I'm looking to do is a pretty standard shot that you will see from this neck of the woods, where I use the stream as a leading line to take you across to the superb mountain profile. Now, one of the problems that I see with a lot of images taken of this mountain is that people tend to head further on up before they set themselves up. What that means is that the mountain does tend to become rather an afterthought. Now, I have mentioned this sort of thing in previous videos, but the last time I brought it up was quite some time ago, more than 2 years, so a lot of you weren't following me at that point, so I think it's worth making the point again. What a lot of people do is head on up to the dry stone wall, where I'm probably about 2/3 of the way up to that. It's a famous landmark. It's a classic image of this part of the world that you may well have seen plenty of times before. I have a real problem with it because I feel that the wall forms a barrier along the bottom third of the image very often. The only one that I'm prepared to tolerate in my own portfolio is this image, where I'm standing slightly further back and I've got two devices, the gate and the style, both of which sort of break up that wall. You do see a lot of images where people are much closer to the wall. But what I've done is stopped alongside the river about 2/3 of the way up, as I mentioned. Now, the reason for being here is so that my composition allows Tryfan to fill at least a half of the frame, and also for my foreground to be reasonably interesting. Now, there are countless foreground opportunities along this side of the stream, and you'll see many an image from here, as I mentioned, but this is one of my favorite spots. Part of the reason is very often the stream kind of disappears away from the camera as it goes over a cascade. What I've got here, and it's something that I have shot before, the water cascades through in a nice little S-curve. Now, there is some white water, but not too much. And so I'm not likely to blow out the highlights by giving the shutter long enough time to streak that water through the bottom half of the image. The other reason for stopping here this morning is that the sun has come up. It's pretty cloudless, although not too harsh light, but there's some really nice side light on the flank of Tryfan, so I want to capture that as well. So I'm going to get myself set up and then I'll explain my composition in more detail. So I'm shooting this image at 12mm, and my composition is quite deliberate. I've spent quite a bit of time here getting it just right. I don't want to go any wider than 12mm, even though I have got a wider lens, because that really is going to diminish the impact of Tryfan. And this is about as far away from it as I would be prepared to be for this sort of shot. What I've done is I've got this nice little bit of white water snaking through my foreground. I'm using a 3-stop ND and a grad because the sky is quite bright up there. This really dark rock in the foreground is contributing to a high dynamic range. But I wanted my shutter speed around about 1/3 of a second. This water's moving quite quickly, so I really did want to smooth it just a little bit. I've also taken a sequence of images so that I can blend the foreground if I want to, because as the water splashes over the rocks, every so often it hits a rock and throws a bit of water here and there. And with 1/3 of a second, you're not always going to capture that. So by taking 5 or 6 versions of exactly the same composition, I can blend those bits in a bit like I do when I'm shooting on the coast. I've lost the light, unfortunately. There was some really nice side light on Tryfan earlier on, but there's a lot of high hazy cloud now, and weather forecast has that set in for the rest of the day, so not much I can do about that. But nevertheless, what you do have is the beautiful profile of the north ridge of the mountain, which gives it that pyramid shape. And then we've got the Glyders sweeping around to the right behind it, with just a little bit of snow here and there in amongst the crags at the top. So that creates a little bit more interest. What I've also done with my mid-ground is to frame it up. I've got a really nice little pointy rock over here on the right-hand side that very much apes the shape of Tryfan. So that's quite good. Usually that side of the image often just tends to drift away down towards Ogwen when you see images from this location. So I'm able to kind of constrain it and frame up the middle of the image, also with another triangular shaped boulder on the left-hand side. Obviously I've got it polarized as well because these rocks are really wet, and I wanted to take that sheen right off them so that I can emphasize the moving water as it snakes its way through them. But I'm reasonably happy with this composition. I've spent probably about half an hour on it. Whilst a lot of my mountain photography is quite reactive when the camera comes off the shoulder strap, sometimes to get the composition just right, I do like to take my time. And this very rarely for me is unlikely to be cropped at all in post. I've been very careful to get it level so that Ogwen doesn't look like it's shifted to one side. But I also haven't got a lot of breathing space for Tryfan or the cascade in the bottom right corner of the image. Normally I would crop to get my final composition, so I've had to take slightly more care in this instance. Well, now this wall behind me is the one that I've been banging on about, not just earlier on the way up here, but in other videos. It really does offend me when people take images and have that running slap bang across their foreground, because all it does is form a barrier to the vista on the other side of the valley. So why would you have it so front and center running horizontally across your composition? It just doesn't work at all. Either you need to be on the other side of the wall and not include it, or you need to get quite a bit further up and have it almost as just a framing device right at the bottom of the image. Now there's one other thing that I wanted to say while I'm just having this breather about halfway up to the summit. That peak over there is called Tryfan. It's not Tryfan or Tryfan, as everybody seems to pronounce it. It's only 2 syllables, Tryfan. It's not hard. And in fact, there's a photographer who used to live around here, who moved away and then recently moved back and is now making vlogs every week from this neck of the woods, who pronounces it Tryfan or Tryfan. It's 2 syllables and they're as follows: tr as in truck and van as in van. There's no F in it, so Tryfan. Say it after me. Great. Now I'm going to head on up to the summit. Now when Skillshare got in touch and said would I be interested in them sponsoring a video, I was really flattered, because I've been a premium member of Skillshare for quite some time. It's great value for money. An annual subscription works out at less than $10 a month, and you get access to thousands of creative classes. Now, a Skillshare membership means that you've got full access to everything they have to offer, all sorts of really interesting and creative skills. Of course, photography and video production. I'm currently taking a class by Thomas Frank in media productivity. It's really interesting. Plus, you get to interact with other people taking the class and the tutor. But there are topics ranging from fine art and music to technical skills like web development and UX design. So there's bound to be something there that you'll find interesting. And the first 1,000 subscribers who click the link below get a free trial of premium membership, so you can explore your creativity too. Well, as usual with these breaks at the summits, it's time for lunch. So while that's on, let's just have a quick chat about Pen Yr Ole Wen. Now, I'm about 150 metres higher than I was on my last trip out on Carn the Viliast. Pen Yr Ole Wen's about 970 odd metres. And whilst it's only about 2 miles as the crow flies from where I'm parked down on the A5, I'm actually 650 metres above where I started out. So this peak is around about 3,200 feet. And it's a bit nondescript. There's a good argument to say, well, what's the point in coming up here? It's just a bit of flat moorland with a loose pile of stones that marks the actual summit. Well, yes, that's all true, but what Pen Yr Ole Wen does is give you absolutely fabulous perspectives across some of the really craggy and interesting peaks of the Glyders, and a really good clear view across to Snowdon. Whilst the light isn't fantastic today, I'm going to try and get 1 or 2 images from up here, probably with a long telephoto, get in tight on some of the detail, because there's a bit of snow dotted around here and there, so that'll soon be gone for the rest of the year, and worth trying to make the most of that. Well, now it's proving a little bit tough up here today because the atmosphere is quite hazy, so all of my targets are lots of mid-tones. It'd be interesting to see if I can pull anything out in post. As I said in a previous video, I don't care. Today is very much about the hike and the photography is, well, let's see what we can do. But I think it's worth talking through a couple of compositions just because it's an interesting perspective and the sort of thing that you might not have seen before, because I actually can't recall any photography videos from this particular summit, not recently anyway. Now, this first shot is with my 75-300 on. I'm actually only in at 85mm, but I did need to get in reasonably tight on this subject material. And what I'm shooting here is just the very top of the Devil's Kitchen and the little plateau up there at Llyn, which you may have seen on Darren's video when he and I hiked up there. That's quite a useful pit stop. There's a big lake, you can pull some water out of it and brew up. Anyway, that's by the by. Why I'm interested in it from here is because it's forming a nice bright bowl. It is catching a little bit of hazy light, and then you've got the whole flank of Snowdon behind it with the two peaks, Garnedigain, the second highest peak, and then of course Snowdon summit itself, a little bit of snow on it. It's quite an interesting composition, and it's something that you really won't see very often. But as I say, the problem is the hazy atmosphere, and almost certainly won't be able to pull much detail out of it. Now, the exposure itself is dead easy. It's standard focusing at infinity, f5.6, ISO 200, and it gets you 800th of a second. So really nothing to do at all apart from just fire off the timer. There is a little bit of detail in the sky behind Snowdon, so you never know what I might be able to pull out in post, but that's one image that I think might work for today from up here. Another one is to get the summit of Tryfan, some quite nice layers behind it. I'm going to need to change lenses for that. Now, this shot is all about a really letterbox composition. And in fact, the midtones and the lack of dynamic range is what I want for this particular shot. I'm just after the very summit of Tryfan and the layers behind it. You can see the Glyders and across to Moel Shabod, and then off down towards the southern end of the Snowdonia National Park. I really like that there's kind of an indistinct sweep of hills, all sitting behind Tryfan, almost like rolling waves, really interesting shapes. And so I plan to crop it really quite landscape, so I don't want anything top and bottom really. The sky doesn't matter. I'm shooting this at about 25-30mm. I'll take a few shots so that I've got some ammunition to play with in post. Again, the exposure's dead easy. This one is really about the unique perspective of a very well-known mountain and the general lie of the land around it. That's what I'm trying to capture with this particular shot. Well, as I said, I'm not entirely sure how things are going to turn out as far as the photography from up here, but I can confirm that having your lunch with views like this on a fabulous day when there's not that much wind, although it's quite chilly up here, you just really can't beat it. So thank you so much for coming along with me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, why not subscribe now and join me next time? Cheers.